sarvartrushu gunandrumaha dadharalokapalanam eka eva prithuggunan Shailadroni virakridam sarvartrushu gunandrumaha dadharalokapalanam eka eva prithaggunan Shailadronibhir akridam sarvarutushu gunandrumaha dadharalokapalanam eka eva prithaggunan. Would anybody like to recite the verse? I will recite once again. Maybe the devotees can get ready to recite. Shaila Virakridam Sarva Rutushu Gunandrumaha Dadhara Lokapalanam Eka Eva Prithak Gunan.
Shaila Dronibir Akridam Sarva Shushu Gunan Drumaha Dadhara Loka Palanam Eka Eva Pritag Gunan.
Thank you, Tarkapoon. Anybody else?
Shaila Dronivir Akridam Sarvatushu Gunan Drumaha Tadara Loka Palanam Eka Eva Pritak Gunan.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Anyone else?
Shaila Dronavir Akridam Sarvatushu Gunam Drumaha Dadara Lokapalanam Eka Eva Pritagunam.
Thank you, Leela Kishore Mataji. So I'll read the word for word translation. Shaila, the hills and mountains. Droni Bihi, with the valleys between them. Akridam, the pleasure grounds for Hiranyakashipu. Sarva, all. Rutushu, in the seasons of the year. Gunan, different qualities, fruits and flowers. Drumaha, plants, the plants and trees. Dadhara, executed. Lokapalanam, of the other demigods in charge of different departments of natural activity. Ekaha, alone. Eva, indeed. Prithak, different. Gunan, qualities. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The valleys between the mountains became fields of pleasure for Hiranyakashipu, by whose influence all the trees and plants produce fruits and flowers profusely in all seasons. The qualities of pouring water, drying, and burning, which are all qualities of the three department heads of the universe, namely Indra, Vayu, and Agni, were all directed by Hiranyakashipu alone, without the assistance from the demigods. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is said in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimaya. This material world is conducted by fire, water, and earth, which combine and take shape. Here it is mentioned that the three modes of nature, Pratak Gunan, act under the direction of the different demigods. For example, King Indra is in charge of pouring water. The demigod Vayu controls the air and dries up the water, whereas the demigod controlling fire burns everything. Hiranyakashipu, however, by the dint of his austere performance of mystic yoga, became so powerful that he alone took charge of everything without assistance from the demigods. I'll read the translation once again. The valleys between the mountains became fields of pleasure for Hiranyakashipu, by whose influence all the trees and plants produce fruits and flowers profusely in all seasons. The qualities of pouring water, drying, and burning, which are all qualities of the three departmental heads of the universe, namely Indra, Vayu, and Agni, were all directed by Hiranyakashipu alone, without assistance from the demigods. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit from the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially in this holy month of Kartik. And Kartik is just a few days left in Kartik, and it's always auspicious to be able to read from the Bhagavatam and in the presence of so many nice devotees to be able to share some of my realizations. And so this section, as we've been reading, is really from the part of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Hiranyakashipu has performed extreme austerities and has received material benedictions from Brahma, and has become extremely powerful because he's no longer afraid of being killed or challenged by any mortal. He has gotten this benediction that he will not be killed on land or sky and so on. So he's gotten all these benedictions. He was already very powerful before he started his austerities, but now he's become even more powerful and has no fear and no foe, which means he just controls everything. So there were 2 points that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport that I wanted to just touch on. One is the material manifestation. Prabhupada says, conducted by fire, water, and earth that combine to take shape. This is explained in great detail in the second canto and the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how Sarga and Visarga happen. Sarga is the primary creation, and Visarga, which is the secondary creation of Brahma. So the primary creation is the creation of the elements, right from earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, which then combine to form the various secondary elements, and then also the controlling deities of the various elements and the mind and the senses. They combine and everything gets created. And then Brahma essentially takes all this primary creation ingredients and then builds the living entities and all the different things in the universe. Just like, and if you're building a house, then you could go to a store like a Home Depot or whatever and buy all the ingredients and then start building using the building blocks. So Brahma similarly takes all the ingredients created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and then builds. He's the chief engineer of the universe, so he builds things within the universe. And as part of this process, there are various demigods who are essentially part and parcel of the universal form of the Lord, who are in charge of various aspects of creation and maintenance of the universe. So they are in charge of, as Prabhupada mentions, Indra is in charge of pouring water, and we heard from Yashodaya Prabhu on Govardhan Puja Day as well, how Indra became proud of his ability to give water, and that created this whole beautiful Leela of Govardhan Leela, where Lord Krishna picked up the Govardhan hill and taught Indra a lesson. Similarly, the demigod Vayu controls the air, the movement of the air, and the property of the air is to be able to dry things up. And then fire controls everything. Everything is as Prabhupada mentions in the purports in the Gita as well, that everything runs because of fire. Even our digestion runs because of fire. So these elements of earth, water, fire, air, ether are pervading the entire universe, and by their actions, everything is manifesting. So the point that this purport talks about and this verse talks about is that Hiranyakashipu became so powerful by the dint of his austerities that he no longer needed these demigods to control anything within his purview. He was able to summon rain when he wanted. He was able to command the earth to deliver whatever produce the earth could produce at any point in time. He didn't have to wait for the seasons, and he could control the air, he could control the weather, he could control the temperature exactly how we like. Just like in our homes, we can set the thermometer or the thermostat to whatever temperature we want that's comfortable for us. Hiranyakashipu could do that for the universe. He could just set the temperature for the universe, saying, well, this is what I want. This is when I want it to rain. And just like how Maharaj Prithu, you will read in the fourth canto, when the earth stopped producing its grains and other forms of produce, Maharaj Prithu became angry at the earth, and he summoned the earth, and the earth agreed to produce everything in abundance for the consumption of the citizens. And similarly, Hiranyakashipu, although he was not godly, because of his austerity, he was able to get to a similar situation where he was able to command all the demigods, and he no longer needed them to agree to provide anything. He just was controlling them to a point where everything was happening by his own physical power. So the question is, how is that possible? How is that possible for a person to become so powerful that he can control not only the demigods but also the material elements? And it's mentioned and Srila Prabhupada mentions this in the purports of chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita as well, which is Dhyana Yoga, where he says that by performance of severe austerities and the principles of Ashtanga Yoga, one can get these what's called siddhis, or these mystic powers, which enable us to control the subtle elements, and you get so many of these powers, like you can become smaller than the smallest, and lighter than the lightest, and bigger than the biggest, heavier than the heaviest, and all these different kind of powers that you can get, which are not the objective of yoga practice. They're more of a distraction. So when you get these powers, they can essentially completely distract you from the real goal of focusing on the spiritual path and focusing on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. So these are more like allurements that distract you from the path. And those who are not fixed in spiritual life can easily get allured by these powers, and then essentially imagine that the objective of performing yoga practice is to first get and then enjoy these powers. And Hiranyakashipu was very much in that mode, where he performed sacrifices, he performed austerities, and then the results that he achieved from these austerities were completely used in enjoying the physical powers that he had acquired and exhibiting those powers, essentially for disturbing the peace of society. That was really his objective. And so it's not at all astonishing that he got this power. So when you look at, even from a scientific standpoint, just like a chemist can mix various chemicals and produce other chemicals and other wonderful things, like just like, you can take crude oil from the earth and you can process it in many ways, and then you can create gasoline, you can create plastics, and then you can shape that plastic into various forms and use it for so many things. It seems like, it's for a person who's not educated in science, it might seem like it's all magic. How can you take crude oil from the earth and then it converts into plastic eventually, and then you can make a bucket out of plastic, you can make a mug out of plastic, you can make so many different things out of plastic? It just seems like completely magical. But for the person who understands the science, it's not very magical. It's just a process. You just need to know what is the process. You need to know how to execute that process, and eventually you get the desired outcome. So similarly, in the subtle sciences, there are these processes and these techniques that are known, which are mostly unknown in this day and age. In the age of Kali Yuga, it's mostly unknown. But in the past ages, it was more widely known, and the spiritual scientists had the ability to manipulate subtle energy and gross energy in a way that they could manifest various aspects of creation. They could also adjust the circumstances in the universe to be able to achieve certain objectives. It's just a question of knowing how to manifest or how to manipulate these various gross and subtle energies. So in this day and age, modern manufacturing and modern science is very, very adept at manipulating gross energy and gross matter, right? So it's not very surprising to us that factories are producing so many different items that we see in everyday life, because it's just a matter of how they manipulate gross material energy and gross material manifestations to get what you need. Similarly, the science of manipulating subtle energy and subtle elements produces wonderful results that a person who's unschooled in that particular science might consider magical, but it's just a matter of knowing how to manipulate that science. And the other aspect that Srila Prabhupada mentions is the modes of nature. See, Prabhupada says that here it is mentioned that the three modes of nature act under the direction of the different demigods, and Hiranyakashipu no longer was under the control of the demigods. So he was able to manipulate three modes of nature to some extent, but it was completely done in the mode of ignorance. And this reminds me of the section in Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the 17th chapter, where Arjuna asked this question to the Lord. Arjuna asked this question to Krishna, that what if someone follows some process, but it's not exactly as per scripture? What happens to such a person? Are they in goodness, passion, or ignorance? And Krishna mentions, and he answers that question, and he says that if you're not exactly following according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra's instructions, then you essentially default to the modes of nature that predominate you. So a person may be predominantly in the mode of goodness, or predominantly in the mode of passion, or predominantly in the mode of ignorance. And I say predominantly because Prabhupada also mentions in the purports there that it's very difficult to find people who are primarily in a certain mode or 100% in a certain mode. There's always mixed modes. So that's why a person may be predominantly in the mode of goodness, but there might still be a tinge of passion or a tinge of ignorance that manifests from time to time. Or somebody might be in the mode of passion, and there's still aspects of goodness that person might exhibit. So what we look at is what the predominating mode is, and the predominating mode is what dictates how our faith is evolving, and that's what Krishna says. And so he specifically talks about foods in the three modes. He speaks about austerity, and he says austerity is of three types: austerity of body, austerity of speech, and austerity of mind. And so, and he explains exactly what austerity of body is, where if someone is performing an austerity for the purpose of for a higher purpose, then that's considered in the austerity in the mode of goodness. But if he tortures his body, that's not considered in the mode of goodness. It's considered in the mode of ignorance, and it's the idea of demons. So someone excessively starves the body, and those kind of things, right? Or for some political purpose or for some other ulterior purpose, those are considered inappropriate. So in this case, you see Hiranyakashipu specifically performed all three austerities. He performed austerity of the body because he stood in a certain position for thousands of years with his hands raised and on one foot. It's a very difficult yogic position. You can stand in that position for maybe a few minutes, and then your arms start aching, your feet start aching. You can probably do it for 10-15 minutes if you're into yoga asanas. You can probably do it for maybe slightly longer, but Hiranyakashipu did it for thousands of years. So definitely he performed austerity of the body, and essentially torturing the body. The body got completely eaten by ants, and so essentially just complete torture of the body. Speech, he completely was not speaking at all. He just controlled his speech to a point where he was just fixed, and his mind was completely fixed on meditating on Brahma. So he definitely performed austerity of body, mind, and speech. But the objective was completely in the mode of ignorance, to be able to destroy all his enemies, and including the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who considered his enemies. So that essentially tells us how the consciousness of Hiranyakashipu was evolved to a point where he was completely fixated on his single purpose of his enmity with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that kind of mindset and that kind of objective with which he performed the austerity resulted in although he got the powers that he wanted because he followed the scientific process, it ultimately resulted in his destruction. So it's important to understand how these modes of nature act on us. And while we may consider that we're doing austerities or we're performing tapasya, it is also important to actually pay close attention to what kind of modes are acting on our consciousness so that we can actually fine-tune the outcome accordingly. And as devotees, as sadhakas, we don't want to be in the mode of goodness alone. We want to transcend the mode of goodness. So as we perform various austerities, we should always be very conscious that we're actually doing it for the pleasure of Krishna and not to prove a point. The whole objective of any austerity we perform, whether it's the foods we eat or restrict ourselves from or anything else that we may do, we have to be 100% focused that the objective of this austerity is to please Krishna. And if we remind ourselves of that point over and over again, then it purifies our consciousness to a point where all our actions, of the mind, the body, and speech are dovetailed to that one objective of pleasing Krishna. And that's the point Srila Prabhupada makes in the 17th chapter of the Gita. And that's the point that he's alluding to here, where he says that although Hiranyakashipu performed these austerities, you will read in the subsequent verses and the subsequent chapters how, in spite of having full control of the material manifestation, he was so disturbed because he couldn't control just one person, which was the sun. So there was not a single person in the manifested universe that was not under his control. All the demigods were, all the material elements were, all the living entities that he had around him definitely were. But the only person that he could not control was the sun Prahlad. And his inability to control this one person created so much disturbance in his mind that ultimately resulted in his destruction. So these are some of the points in this particular verse. I'll read the translation just once again so we can meditate on it, the words of Srila Prabhupada. The valleys between the mountains became fields of pleasure for Hiranyakashipu, by whose influence all the trees and plants produce fruits and flowers profusely in all seasons. The qualities of pouring water, drying and burning, which are all qualities of the three departmental heads of the universe, namely Indra, Vayu, and Agni, were all directed by Hiranyakashipu alone, without assistance from the demigods. So here are some of my thoughts on this verse. I'm keen to hear other comments or thoughts from the devotees. Hare Krishna. Any comments or any thoughts?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your nice class. I really like that point you were just sharing about how if the living entity is not following strictly according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then they slip back into their predominating mode of nature that fuels them. I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about that point.
Yeah, thank you, Mother Lila. That's a very, very wonderful meditation, actually. And so if you follow the sequence of the Gita, the 16th chapter, Krishna speaks about divine and demonic natures. And he contrasts divine and demonic natures. And he reassures Arjun that, don't worry, Arjun, you're born of the divine nature, your divine qualities. And he reassures Arjun at that point. And after speaking about these two extremes, the question that, so there are 2 points here. One is Krishna does not say that there's the divine, the demonic, and the neutral. He doesn't say that. So he clearly says that if you're not divine, you automatically are demonic, because, and he makes it very clear this way. So, so if you're not aligning with the mood of trying to please Krishna, then you're essentially in some way displeasing Krishna. So that's the point he makes. So that actually leads Arjun to ask this question in the 17th chapter. He says, well, there are many people who have some faith and still follow some processes. They may not be exactly following uh, the Guru Sadhu Shastra, but they still, you see people around you all the time, like people in society. They may be philanthropic, they might be, benevolent to others, they might be kind to others, they might be doing so many things. Right? They might be giving charity, helping the poor, um, volunteering at various venues to help people. May also be going to temples and churches and performing their share of worship in some way, right? They might be worshiping in their home in some way, and they might be doing so many things that they've learned from their families, traditions that they've carried on. And this is very common. Most people are essentially in that bucket where they've not single-mindedly decided that the goal of life is to become Krishna conscious or God conscious and dedicating their life in that pursuit. Most people are not like that. Most people are just getting on with their lives and trying to do day-to-day things. And if they're decent people, they have some idea of some sort of higher power, and they try to follow what they think is right. Some people use their own intelligence, and they might follow what they think is right. And this is what generally you see in the world. And so Arjun's question is really applicable to the vast majority of people that are essentially alive today. And the question that he asks is very interesting. He says, and he asks it in a certain way that he says, what about those who follow certain processes but may not be 100% strict scriptural, or may not 100% be exactly per the direction, but they still follow? What happens? What is the nature of their faith? Is it in goodness? Is it in passion or ignorance? And so this point of understanding how the three modes of material nature work, and the 14th chapter of the Gita is all about the three modes of nature. It's actually very, very important to understand how these modes of nature are working, even as a practicing devotee. Because one of the things Srila Prabhupada used to say is that, he used to say, and I've read this in Prabhupada's comments and notes, that he would tell his disciples that one of the problems that you all have is that you're not sufficiently afraid of Maya. You're not sufficiently afraid of the three modes of material nature. You think you can control it. You think you can put your foot in the quagmire of Maya and then take your foot out, because you can balance your spiritual consciousness and your material consciousness. And Krishna says in the 7th chapter of the Gita, he says, Devi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. So Devi Hesha, this divine nature, this divine modes of nature of Krishna, they're Krishna's energy, Krishna's Maya. And so they are divine because they're Krishna's energy. They are actually Krishna's energy. But he says they're also very difficult to overcome. Mama Maya, my Maya, is Duratyaya. Duratyaya means very difficult to overcome. It's not easy to overcome this. Krishna himself says that. He says it's very difficult to overcome. So what makes us think that we can overcome it without actually the help from Krishna? And Krishna says in the next line how we can overcome it. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. He says Mam eva. Mam is first person singular. Unto me, eva. Eva is exclusively, only. One who exclusively surrenders to me. Prapadyante. Prapadyante means surrender. One who exclusively surrenders to Krishna. mayam etam tarantite. Taranti means to cross over, actually even to swim. Tara in Sanskrit means to swim. So basically, Krishna is saying that if you exclusively surrender to me, you can easily cross over. You can easily swim across this ocean of Maya. If you wanted to go from the east coast of the United States to, say, Europe, just crossing the ocean, you can buy a plane ticket. It's very easy. You can just sit on the plane. You can essentially sleep, and the plane will take you across. Or you can get on a ship, and it'll take you across. But if you try to swim across, it's very difficult. Sorry, not difficult. It's impossible. You cannot actually swim a couple thousand miles. Nobody's done it. Even if you're an expert swimmer, you cannot do it. And that's the kind of scenario we're talking about, right? That unless you have the help of a ship or a plane, you cannot actually go to Europe from the United States just by your own effort, by your own swimming or anything else. So similarly, this energy of Krishna, this Maya energy, is very powerful. And it's here for a reason, that those who are materially conscious, those who are materially motivated, and not really aligned with Krishna, cannot go to the spiritual world. We are not fit to go there unless you're actually aligning yourself with Krishna, because everybody in the spiritual world is 100% aligned with Krishna. And he's the center of everything. The entire focus of everyone in the spiritual world is to glorify Krishna, to please Krishna. So if our consciousness is to essentially be self-centered and not Krishna-centered, we don't belong in the spiritual world. So the Maya energy actually keeps us here, because Maya energy says, okay, if you want to enjoy yourself and you are the center of your existence, then you can try. And these are the constraints that I'm going to give you. And over time, you can realize that it's not going to work out, or you can keep trying, birth after birth after birth. And the sooner we realize that it's not going to work out and we focus on how can we get out, that becomes our path out. So this Maya energy, this three modes of material nature, essentially are Krishna's tool to make us realize that we're not in control. And the sooner we realize that, the better it is for our spiritual life. The more we try to fight it, the more we get entangled. It's one of those, if you ever observe a spider web, and a spider web, if a little insect gets caught in that spider web, the more the little insect thrashes around, the more it gets entangled in the web. And there's absolutely no way for it to get out. And we're in the same situation. The more we try to fight the three modes of material nature, thinking we can overcome it, the more entangled we become. So we have two options. Either we allow our innate nature to take over and take us wherever we want to go, or we make the effort to actually focus on Krishna and take his help to take us out of our innate natures and increase our level of consciousness. Srila Prabhupada actually explains that very clearly in the purports of the 17th chapter. He says that just because someone is predominantly in the mode of passion or ignorance doesn't mean that they can stay there or they need to stay there. They can actually progress to the higher modes and then eventually transcend the modes. Yes, Dhruva Prabhu.
So, yeah, your comments on that point. I was thinking that, just like that point you raised about Srila Prabhupada saying, his disciples are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. In a similar way, I find that sometimes, I find myself in a situation where I check the boxes. I have a spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada said that he has the backdoor key, so he'll let us into the spiritual world. And I'm not as sinful as Jagai and Madai. There was, I think, no sin that they ever committed. So because of these criteria, I feel that I am surrendered to Krishna and guaranteed to go back home, back to Godhead. So this kind of mentality, it seems like sometimes keeps us stuck, because, we're checking the boxes that, yes, I've got a spiritual master. So, I'm a surrendered soul. And in this way, sometimes, we can ride the waves, so to speak, for decades and decades, and unfortunately take another birth. But somehow, because we check the boxes, we think that no, I'm making advancement. I'm making advancement. So suddenly we seem to think that I'm a senior devotee, and I've been around for 15, 20, 25 years, and as a result. So how? And of course, we hear classes regularly. You know, we definitely check the boxes. But how to snap out of this mode that I'm not as sinful as Jaga and Madai? Sometimes I say that Krishna consciousness is a very, very personal thing. And, we can't just keep going around judging each other. But at the same time, somehow we need to snap out of this mode that I'm not as sinful as Jaga and Madai. Any comments, please, to snap me out of this la la land?
No, we may not be as sinful as Jagai and Madai. And yeah, in fact, I remember one anecdote from Srila Prabhupada where one of the disciples wrote him a letter saying, Dear Srila Prabhupada, your insignificant servant, and so on. And then he said, I'm the most insignificant person. And then he started his main body of the letter saying, Srila Prabhupada, I have a big problem. And Prabhupada chuckled and said, how can an insignificant person have a big problem? Our problems are also insignificant. So anyway, so the analogy that always helps me, and I don't always, and I pray that I can be conscious of this point all the time. But if you go to an airport, you've seen a moving walkway in an airport. You just stand and it takes you forward.
Right.
Yeah. So we actually in a moving walkway, but it's going the other direction because of Maya's moving walkway actually is in the other direction. So if you simply stand, you're actually going to go backwards. So if you simply coast, the analogy that I think about is that if you simply coast in our Krishna consciousness, we're actually going to go backwards. So we have to actively make more effort than the pace of the backward push. If you simply coast in this, because we're in this Kali Yuga, because we are in this modes of material nature and our baser instincts take over, our baser modes take over, if you simply coast, we're actually going backwards each passing day. So not only we have to move forward, but we have to move forward at a faster pace than we're going backward to actually make progress in spiritual life. Right. And if you don't think about it that way, and if you say, well, I'll just mail it in, is the phrase we use, right? It's just, I'm not going to put the actual effort. I'm just going to show up and just do the bare minimum. We're actually going backwards. And you can actually feel that in your quality of your sadhana, quality of your conscience. You can actually feel that. This is something that the more acutely aware of this we are, the more we realize that we have to make more effort, right? So we all have been in this moment for a long time. There are devotees who've been there for many, many decades and way more advanced and senior than me. So I'm not making this point specifically to any individual. What I'm saying is that in general, over time, our chanting becomes mechanical, our process of hearing becomes mechanical, and even speaking becomes mechanical because we've read so much and we've absorbed so much Shastra that we could just give class on any verse, any topic without actually thinking too much about it. It's all becoming mechanical. The words come out of our mouth, but they don't actually go through our heart. They just come out from our brain, out of our mouth. So it's more of a mental and intellectual exercise as opposed to something from the heart. So even a person who's speaking about Bhagavatam, it can get mechanical. The chanting can get mechanical. The hearing can get mechanical. Everything gets mechanical. It's just a matter of fact. And this is our comfort zone. The practice of Krishna consciousness becomes our comfort zone. We're around devotees because that's our comfort zone. We're not so comfortable with the general population. We're more comfortable here. We're more comfortable with the practices and the rituals that we follow. Our lingo becomes the Krishna conscious lingo. We speak about, I'm your servant and I'm so fallen. It becomes the way we talk. it doesn't actually become the way we feel. So it becomes the way of speaking. So as practitioners, it's very easy to practice the externals of Krishna consciousness. We can very easily wear kantimala, tilak, and we should do those things. It's not like we shouldn't do those things, but it's very easy to just do that and not really internalize what Krishna conscious is. It's not just about the externals. It's not about how we speak. It's not about calling each other Prabhu and physically offering obeisances when you see the other person and saying I'm the most fallen and everything is happening with Krishna's pleasure. We say all of that. It's very easy to do that, but do we actually feel that? Do we actually embody that feeling in every aspect of our life? That's really the key, because it's very easy to cast the externals. And just like the example that I gave, if we just do that, we can actually, if you introspect, you can actually understand that the quality of sadhana is degrading, the quality of our consciousness is degrading. So unless we actually make a concerted effort to understand that it's not about the rituals, it's not about the externals, it's not about just being able to quote shastra or recite verses or give wonderful classes or sing wonderful kirtans. Those are all good. But Krishna consciousness is about transforming our consciousness. And if that doesn't become our focus, then we're going to go backwards. We could be the most eloquent speaker of the Bhagavatam. We could be the most wonderful kirtan singer. We could be the most learned person quoting thousands of verses from Bhagavatam. We could do all of that. But if the focus is not on our consciousness, and Srila Prabhupada very specifically named this movement International Society for Krishna Consciousness, not Krishna activities or anything else. So the focus is not internal in our consciousness, then we end up becoming, and pardon me for using the word, hypocrites. We act like devotees, we speak like devotees, but we're not really becoming devotees. And I don't know, I've said too many things which are kind of harsh. So
fantastic. Thank you so much. I've never heard, an explanation, and I'll always remember the escalator, well, the moving floor. But that's, I think you made so many nice, wonderful points there that, makes me, start to introspect. I guess, like you pointed out, it's more of a heart connection, and so many things we can do mechanically just straight from the brain, but that's not the essence of Krishna consciousness. So thank you. You might have to repeat it one more time at some point, because unfortunately somehow or the other this class is not being recorded, but I'd like to, when you recite it again, I'd like to record it and be able to remind myself, because I guess that's the point Prabhupada was making when he made that statement, my disciples are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. And he was saying, here I am, every day, I think he said in that letter, here I am every day praying to Krishna not to let me fall down. But, everybody else around me is not afraid of Maya. So thank you for those reminders that, how everything can just become so mechanical. I pray that I can break these bad habits.
thank you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.